Merry Christmas and welcome to a very special episode of the Fluent English Conversation podcast. Today I'm going to be talking about my family's Christmas traditions and the way that we normally celebrate this festive period. I was planning on recording this ages ago now, but actually because I've been a bit sick, I've been laid up and there's been lots of stuff happening in my family and with work and loads of other crazy stuff. I'm actually recording this the day before Christmas Eve. So it's gonna literally be recorded and uploaded. So I hope you don't mind this a little more quick impromptu type of video, but I really wanted to share some Christmas stories with you and some interesting parts about our Christmas celebrations. Before we get started with the actual story, one quick thing I wanted to talk to you about is the names of the different days over the Christmas period. So, Christmas Day is the 25th of December in the English-speaking world, and the day before Christmas Day, the 24th of December, is Christmas Eve, so spelt E-V-E. And that's Old English for the evening or the day before a special event. We don't really use it much in conversational English now, but if you read old classic literature like Jane Austen or stuff like that, you will see phrases like on the eve of her wedding, for example, meaning the evening or the day before. So we have Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and the 26th of December is Boxing Day. Interestingly, most native speakers don't actually know the origins of this name. I didn't actually know it before I became a teacher, and then every student would ask me, why is it Boxing Day? Are they punching each other because everyone gets drunk at Christmas? No, it's not because of fighting. It's actually because in Victorian times, or at least a very long time ago, rich families used to go out and do charity work the day after Christmas, where they used to prepare boxes of food and gifts for poor people. And that's where the name Boxing Day came from. Now it's just another part of the celebration and no one really knows what that tradition is about, but I thought it would be interesting to share it with you. As well as Christmas, we also have New Year. So the 1st of January is New Year's Day. And notice that's New Year's with the apostrophe S, so because it's the day of the new year, basically. So we have New Year's Day is the 1st of January, and the 31st of December is New Year's Eve. Just like Christmas Eve is the day before Christmas Day, New Year's Eve is the day before New Year's Day. And you'll notice when you watch like Hollywood films about this time of year, you'll often see abbreviations, especially in America, of like NYE, which literally stands for New Year's Eve. So if you see that, now you know exactly what that means. When I talk about our family's traditions, over the last few years it's changed quite a lot with COVID and then having kids and stuff like that. So I wanted to really go over and talk about what we used to do before life kind of got crazy over the last couple of years. On Christmas Eve, we used to go to my in-laws. When I say my in-laws, I normally mean my mother and father-in-law, although it also extends to the other close related in-laws like my brother-in-law. In this case, when I say my in-laws, I mean my mother and father-in-law's house. We used to go there and have what we would call like a buffet. So my mother-in-law would prepare loads of different stuff. There would be hot food and cold food. There'd be crisps. There'd be sandwiches or things you could use to make sandwiches. There'd be something that's very local called an oat cake, which you'll remember from my breakfast video if you've seen that one. And if you haven't, make sure you check out that episode too, which is a savoury pancake. And they would get an oat cake, they would put butter on it and then grated cheese, roll it up and then cut it into slices. So it's a little bit strange, and actually I'd never had it before I went to my in-laws for a Christmas Eve celebration, but apparently that's the in thing around here for buffets. And when I say around here, because I'm not actually from where I live now, I'm originally from London and my family is also from London. My wife's family is from the town where we live now, which is in the Midlands, in the centre of England. So some of the stuff they do here is a little bit unusual compared to what we used to do. So we used to go and do that and have a buffet on Christmas Eve, and then Christmas Day is always the big celebration. And we used to host it for all of us. And when I say all of us, I mean my mother-in-law, father-in-law, my brother-in-law, myself, my wife, and then now my kids. We always did the cooking because my mother-in-law is not the best chef. And my wife is actually very, very good. So because Christmas is all about the food, we wanted to make sure that we had really nice food. So we ended up cooking all the time, which actually became a bit of a chore, which is why we're not doing it now. We only actually cook for us and our boys. So what used to happen was that we would wake up at like 6 a.m., something like that, kind of like excited kids, but actually just to start cooking. And the Christmas meal in England especially is one big roast dinner, usually for lunchtime. And we call it a Christmas dinner, even though it's actually at lunchtime. It's a little bit strange, but, just go with it. Most families would have a turkey. We don't actually like turkey because can be quite dry unless you cook it really well. So we have chicken. But usually there's a big roasted bird surrounded by different side dishes and vegetables and stuff like that. We would usually prepare the chicken and we would put butter under the skin. We would put lots of herbs and salt and pepper, and then we would cover it in bacon so that it stays nice and moist and juicy. And inside we would put some lemons and onions just so it would steam and have some extra flavor. And then in the roasting tray, which is a big long deep tray, we would put loads of water, and usually you would sit the chicken on top of some chopped up vegetables, potatoes, onions, carrots, that kind of thing. And that would go in the oven straight away because it would take a really long time to cook, probably about 4-5 hours maybe. And for some reason our oven has this tendency of turning off when the oven is too full. It's like the thermostat clicks off and then it shuts off. So we have to keep checking it and then keep turning it back on and maybe removing something if the oven's getting too hot, which always winds me up because it's an oven, it's supposed to get hot, but for some reason when we're cooking a big meal like that, it always becomes a problem. So we would start the chicken early because then once it was cooked, we could take it out to rest and then we could put everything else back in to get it all warm. So we would actually end up cooking things in batches and then putting it all back in at the end. When we talk about resting the meat, at least from what I understand of watching MasterChef, usually you're supposed to take a roasted piece of meat out of the oven and then you're supposed to leave it on the side for it to basically sit, and that would allow the meat and the juices and all of that stuff to settle, and apparently it tastes better. I don't really know the logic behind it, but usually we would rest it because we didn't have enough space in the oven, so we wanted all of the food to be hot. That is why we actually did it. Alongside the bird, if you like, we would always have a load of different side dishes. For vegetables, you always start with roast potatoes. And the roast potatoes, normally what you would do is you would peel them, boil them, and you would boil them until they were a little bit soft on the outside, but they were still relatively firm in the middle. And then you would drain them, put them back in the saucepan where you boiled them, and you would shake them around, and that gave them like a fluffy skin around the outside, and that was something that then would get all of the oil and go nice and crispy. We actually used to add, or we still do when we do roast potatoes, we add flour, salt and pepper, and then again we shake it around a bit more, and the flour also then is something that catches all of that oil and gets nice and crispy. We cook them in goose fat or duck fat, so it's super crispy, super fatty and heavy, but the whole meal is fatty and heavy, so don't be surprised if the rest of this sounds like it's going along the same kind of lines. And normally what you have to do is you take the goose fat or the duck fat and you pour it into a baking tray or a roasting tray, depending on what you have. And normally they come in a little jar about this big, and you'd pour loads in, and you have to put it in the oven and let it get really hot before you add the potatoes. Otherwise they just don't go crispy. So we would put it into the oven with the fat, and then once it's liquid and it's really hot, we would take it out of the oven, and then one of us would hold that tray and the other one would pour all the potatoes in. And then try and like spin them around so there's a bit of oil on everything, and then get it back in the oven as quickly as you can so that the fat stayed really hot and then starts going crispy. And then every so often, maybe every 15-20 minutes, you would want to baste them, which is where you take some of the juices and you cover all the potatoes. So you get a spoon and maybe tilt the tray and start pouring it over the top and stuff like that. So the potatoes took a lot of love, but they are the best potatoes, the best roast potatoes of the year. So they're really worth that little bit of extra effort. Alongside the potatoes, we would also have carrots and parsnips. Parsnips are the white carrots. If you've ever seen those in the supermarket, they usually are a bit fatter on one end and they go very, very thin on the other end. And they taste very similar to a carrot, maybe slightly less sweet, but yeah, really delicious. And we would also cook those in oil, but usually carrots and parsnips you'd cook with honey as well. So we would roast them in some goose fat or duck fat because we always had loads available. And then once they were cooked and they were really nice and soft, then we would put honey on them at the end and they'd just go really sweet and sticky, and extra heavy because, what do you want when you've got a sweet carrot? More sweetness. As well as that, we would also steam some vegetables, which we used to cook right at the end because there's no point boiling up loads of Brussels sprouts or something and then leaving them for hours and hours. But we would always have Brussels sprouts, which are little green balls, and most people don't like them, actually. They're very bitter. I really enjoy them. For me, they're stereotypical, they're quintessential Christmas food. So even if you only have a couple, you still kind of have to have them at Christmas. We would also tend to do peas and broccoli and some other stuff, but generally it's a bit like salad at a barbecue. It's kind of a token gesture. It's not really what you're there for. It's all about the meat and the potatoes and all that stuff. But if you don't have any greens there, it's not really a proper roast dinner. And sometimes we would do red cabbage, or we would buy some pre-made red cabbage with red wine sauce or something like that. Usually we ended up pre-buying it because it's just easier to put it in the microwave, and the rest of the family doesn't really enjoy it, so it's only my wife and I that would really like it. So we just bought a little microwave packet of that just to put on the table. And then alongside that, we would have two very typical side dishes. One of them is called pigs in blankets and one of them is called stuffing. Stuffing traditionally was what you used to put inside a piece of meat to give it flavour and to help it stay really moist and succulent. We don't like doing that because it actually takes a lot longer to cook it, and we find it cooks much better if there's actually air inside the meat, especially if it's a chicken. But the stuffing itself is a really nice side dish. It's basically breadcrumbs, sage, onion, and some other herbs, and you have this dry mix and it's all dehydrated stuff. You pour boiling water into it, and because it's a special stuffing, not just the normal one you'd make for a roast dinner, you actually add sausage meat to it. So it's like pork sausage meat with breadcrumbs and herbs and stuff like that. And then you mix it all together and it becomes this kind of meatloaf mixture, and then you cook it in the oven afterwards. So it's like a bit of bready meat that goes on the side of your other meat. And then just in case that wasn't enough meat, we have pigs in blankets, which are pork sausages wrapped in bacon. So normally you would get really big pork sausages from the butchers, really thick, streaky bacon. You wrap it around, cook it in the oven, the bacon goes nice and crispy, and it's just amazing. Because what do you need when you've got a really nice, delicious pork sausage? Wrapping it in bacon, obviously, because pork's not enough without more pork. So if you're noticing a theme here, there's lots of fat, but there's also just lots and lots of meat, lots and lots of beige, lots and lots of brown food, which, if you know anything about the food that I like, it's the perfect food to celebrate Christmas. And alongside all of these things, you would normally have a couple of different sauces. So you would have gravy, which is a meat sauce, basically. And you normally have like gravy granules, which are, it's basically like a powdered gravy sauce mix. You normally add boiling water and it's beef or chicken or vegetable flavoured sauce once you create it. When we do it for Christmas, we take all of the juices from the meat and put it in a pan, and then we add some extra boiling water and some of these gravy granules, and it makes this really flavourful, tasty gravy compared to just the normal one where if you have the granules and boiled water. So we would always make a huge jug of that because everybody loves having gravy. So we'd actually tend to make a really big saucepan, and then it would have also the lemon juice from inside the meat and all of that stuff. Just amazing. And then you have cranberry sauce, which is very, very typical because it's a little bit sweet, a little bit bitter. It's really nice with all the different meat and stuff like that. So that's something else you would have on the side. And there's one that I particularly like, which no one else in my family really understands. And then when I explain it to students, it does kind of make me feel like it's a little bit weird, which is bread sauce. So you heard me right there, bread sauce. And it's literally what it says on the tin. You basically make like a bechamel sauce, but instead of adding cheese, you just add breadcrumbs or bread. So it's literally liquid bread. But it's just really nice, and it goes really well with the potatoes and the other kind of bready stuff. And it might be a bit heavy and it might be a bit stodgy, but I just love that kind of food, and it's just one of those things that I love to have at Christmas. And so if you hear that list and all the stuff that's involved in doing that, and thinking that maybe we have 3 trays in the oven, so we have to keep rotating, boiling something, putting it in the oven, taking it out, putting it somewhere else, it used to take us from about 6 a.m. until 1 p.m., something like that, with all of the different work. And then in the middle of that, we would also open presents with the family, and we would host our in-laws and give them drinks and all of that kind of stuff. So basically, half of the day, from 6 a.m. till about 1 o'clock, was just cooking, washing up, hosting, and you could basically do nothing else. You'd maybe have 10 minutes to quickly open a couple of presents, then run back in the kitchen. So not very relaxing, which is why after 10 years we basically said that we're not doing it anymore. And then in the evening, because we used to eat so much at lunchtime, we would either just have like some chocolate from one of the celebration boxes, or we would make up some party food or a cheese board or something very light where you can just pick at a few bits and you don't really need a big meal. But we also used to keep a lot of leftovers, because I used to enjoy making what I would call my Christmas picnic, where for the next couple of days around lunchtime, I would get all of the leftovers together, the leftover chicken, pigs in blankets and stuffing, and I would literally sit on the living room floor like a picnic, and I would make up sandwiches and I would just eat loads and loads of food. So although it's the typical Christmas dinner dish, we actually would eat it. I would eat it for days and days afterwards. So it's just amazing. And that's really why food is so important in our Christmas celebrations, because we just love it so much. This year, we're actually going to be cooking our roast dinner only for the 2 of us, and we're going to be doing it in the evening, because at the moment we've got 2 young boys. Our eldest is almost 3, he'll be 3 in April, and our youngest is like 7-8 months. So if you can imagine, when you're sitting down to eat a meal with them, you can't really sit and eat it slowly and relax, because you've got to make sure they're both eating, and if they're shouting, maybe they're throwing food around, it gets a bit chaotic. So we decided to relax this Christmas day. What we're going to do is have some normal food during the day, and then in the afternoon I'm going to take the boys and my wife's going to get all of the food sorted, and then the second they're both in bed, we're going to put all the food on the table and have a nice relaxing Christmas meal where we can eat as much as we possibly can, and we can actually eat it while it's hot and it's fresh, which isn't something we get to do very much these days. I mentioned that you normally do presents in the morning. This year we're not actually doing presents. We decided that we would rather just spend that little bit of money on some really nice food over the Christmas period, and maybe getting some nice food for Christmas Eve. So we're not actually going to be doing much like that, but normally you would open your presents on Christmas morning. So I know in different parts of the world, some people open them on Christmas Eve at midnight, some people open them on Christmas Day in the afternoon. I actually know some people in Italy that open them on like the 13th of December, because there's a special celebration then, which again, each to their own. And in our house, we always did it in the morning. And it was one of those things that as a child, you were always told that you had to go to sleep, otherwise Santa can't come to your house and drop off all the presents and that kind of thing. So we always used to wake up really, really early and try and get the presents. Now, being a little bit older, I'm quite happy to get a little bit of sleep, but I'm pretty sure my boys don't quite agree with that plan. Well, I think that's a really good spot to leave it in. I hope I've shared a little bit of our Christmas magic, of our family celebrations and the sort of stuff that we like to do. Obviously, I focus mainly on the food, but I think that's because it's something that's quite unique and special, and I just love talking about food, so why not? But in the meantime, I hope you have a great festive season, whatever it is that you're doing. I hope you found this interesting and useful, and you've learned some new vocabulary along the way. And I can't wait to continue sharing these with you in the new year and in 2024. So, have a fantastic day, have a very Merry Christmas, and I will speak to you very soon.